Hi, everyone. Welcome to this ProcessMaker 3 training session, which is part of the beginners training series powered by Diapo Diamond. I am your host and trainer, Afe Araram. For our ninth session, we shall be spending time working on our demo project. And this time around, we want to focus on completing as much as possible everything about the initiation task. So at the end of this session, you should know how to configure task assignments and set gateway conditions for the tasks in your process workflow map. You should know more about ProcessMaker tables, or also otherwise known as PM tables. And then you should get some introduction to triggers, what trigger timing is all about, and how it's essential to the architecture of your process. You should know about the usefulness of the variable selector button and what case variable prefixes are and how they can be useful to us when we add PHP logic to our triggers. Then you should also come to understand how to set conditions for triggers and how to test your triggers and how to debug your triggers as well. So much to unpack for this session. Let us begin. So let's open our process, and looking at our process flow, we see that the employee initiates a case on the process. It goes to the supervisor, and the supervisor has the option to either approve or reject. Okay, so if the supervisor is going to approve or reject, then we need to set a condition or conditions for this gateway. Now, I would want to use a variable called is approved to set the gateway condition. So we need to create that variable. So let's quickly create that. Is approved. So this is going to be the variable we're going to use to set the conditions for our gateway. And the data type is going to be string. Note that and save. So we can come here now and go to properties, and what do we want to set? Select the is approved variable at is approved. We're going to talk about this. I'm just going to mention this now. So once we use the at prefix before the name of the variable, ProcessMaker considers that to be a string. If you click on this question button here or over on it, you see at denotes a string. For you to cast the variable as a float value, we use the at hash or hash at pound. And for us to cast the variable as an integer value, we use the at percentage symbol. We combine at and percentage together. And if we want it as an original type, then we use the at equal to. And if we want it as an object, we use the at and or ampersand symbol. Okay? So note those prefixes. They are important for our process variables. So when at is approved is equal to 0, then that is a reject scenario or situation. It should go back to the initiation task. But let's copy this and paste here. If it is equal to 1, then that is an approved scenario. It should go forward to the finance officer. The same thing applies here to this other gateway. We set the same thing to return back to the employee reports expense when it is rejected, but go forward to the finance officer task when it is approved. So change that to 1 and we save that. So we are done with setting the gateway conditions for our process. Then it will not be this easy to just set your gateway conditions because you may not have an idea a complete understanding or knowledge rather of all the variables that you need to define the conditions. So we have complex processes where you want to control what forms will be shown and some other things. So while you build the process task by task and your understanding of the process or the business requirement for the process expands, you'll get to see that you may need to modify some of your gateway conditions in the context of your current knowledge of the process. Okay, so it's quite possible for you to have set gateway conditions, and sometime later, as you continue the development of the process, you need to modify those conditions to suit what you are building. Okay, now since we've defined the gateway conditions for the two gateways we have on our process flow, next thing we need to do is to set task assignments. Now, I expect that when the supervisor rejects, it should go back to the specific employee that initiated the request. So for that, I will need to use value-based assignment for the first task. And that will require me to use a process variable, like we saw in our previous lesson. And so for that, I'm going to use the process variable case owner UID. So I'm going to come here and create case owner UID. Okay, so the case owner UID, and I save that. So that's what I will use here, and that's what I will also use for the first task in the expense report leg of the process. Now, I want my process at runtime to be able to determine the supervisor of the employee and set the variable that will hold the UID of the employee supervisor at runtime. So I need another variable to use here because I shall be using the value-based assignment. Like I said before, I don't like using manual assignment or cyclical assignment because in this case, an employee has a specific supervisor. So cyclical task assignment will not work. Now, I wouldn't go for manual because it will be, in terms of the user experience, the employee will now we have to select a supervisor from a drop down. I would prefer that the system is able to determine the supervisor of the employee at one time, because for this particular business process, every employee has a specific supervisor. So I shall be using a variable called supervisor UID. So I'll need to create that too. So let's quickly do that. Supervisor UID. And I have that. Okay. So for my finance, it goes to the finance officer. So the finance officer in this case is the group of officers or accountants in the organization. And so for that, it's safe for us to use self-service. So let's quickly set the assignment rules now. So this will be value-based. Remember, we created a case owner UID. So we select that and we insert the variable. So at case owner UID. And who are those that are permitted to have permissions to initiate a case on this process? Employees, of course. So I add employees to that and I save. Then we repeat the same thing here for value-based assignments, and we select, case owner UID, and we, of course, employees. Let's go to the supervisor link now. Still value-based, and we are going to select the supervisor UID. So we have at supervisor. Let's just copy this because we're going to use it in the other task. Copy. And for here, we can choose to assign supervisors here. Okay, not that it matters, but at least for the purpose of permissions, case permissions. Now, we're going to come here too and let's do this other supervisor task first. And we paste the supervisor UID variable there. Then set the assignment rules for the finance task. This will be self-service, and we need finance officers there. Save. And this one too, we need self-service and finance officers. And that is done. Okay. So before we continue, I want to talk about PM tables. So PM tables are process maker tables that exist in that create once you create a process maker table from your admin tab. Remember, we go to our admin section of our process maker instance, and on the left we go to the settings tab. We have what we call PM tables. So process maker PM tables provide an interface for us to provide an interface for us to create tables in the ProcessMaker database directly from the web application. It's a very useful feature because it allows us to maintain data that can be shared across multiple processes and even external applications, such as your business intelligence reporting tools. Now, there are two types of PM tables that can be created in ProcessMaker. As you can see, if we are right now, we are in the admin section of ProcessMaker under the settings tab, and we've selected the option PM tables. And you can see this bar here, and we have new, edit, delete, data, import, exports, and so on. And so the new button has a drop down, and from that you see new PM table and new report table. Okay, so a PM table is an empty table to which we can add our own data, while report tables are created from case data of the selected process. So we shall be talking about report tables later when we are done working on our demo process. But for now, we're going to create one PM table to see how it can be done. And for that, we would need to create a table holding the departments for MSB cooperation. Okay, so let's quickly get to that. So new, and when we select new, we will see that there is a field for us to type in the name, of the table. And then after that, we need to give a description of the table. And then we will now need to define the feed columns and the feed labels and the data type that constitutes the fields in the table. Okay, so let's type, let's call this MSB department, MSB departments. Okay, and for the description, let's say table to hold the list of departments for MSB Corporation. Okay, so we have that down. And now to the fields, let's see. We want to have a field for department name. We want a field for department code, and we need a field to hold the email address of the department head or the department supervisor. Okay. Now, in practice, when I create tables like this, it's quite possible that things change in an organization rather, and it's quite possible that a department that exists today does not exist tomorrow. So it's important to add an extra column that I will call on name department status, and that will allow us to set in the status of a department as active or inactive. So let's create. So add the first field will be ID. This ID field will serve as primary key field. So we'll indicate this big int for the type, and it will be null. It shouldn't accept null values, of course, because it's a primary key field. And we indicate that it's a primary key field. And as well, we say it should auto increment. Okay. Now, size for this, let's put 10 there, or 50. Okay, let's update that. Now, we add another field. This time around, I want to call this department status, dpt underscore status. Okay, now copy what we have here. Should be the same thing as the field label. And this is going to be a Boolean, either a 1 or a 0. So I'll take Boolean, and that's that. We update. Okay, add a next field. This time around, department name, DEPT underscore name. And that should be its label at the same time as well. And then this should be a varchar, and size should be 150. Should it accept null values? No. And then we can update this. Okay. Next, we add a department code. Remember, we need to match it to what we have here. So DPT code, copy that and paste here. This too should be a varchar field, size 10. And yes, it can be null. It can accept null values. And lastly, let's add what we call supervisor email. Let's copy that, paste. These two will be a varchar, and the size 100, and it can accept null values as well. Okay. So we have that, and we can now click on create. So we have one PM table now on our list. If we go to our database and we refresh and search for MSB rather, you see PMT underscore MSB underscore department. This is because ProcessMaker, every table you create from the front end, ProcessMaker is going to prefix it with the PMT underscore prefix. So note that very well. Now, if we select this table and check data, you see it's still empty, just as it is empty from the front end. So how do we add data? We can add data from the front end by selecting the table. And if you want to edit the table, you use edit and you can add more columns. But mind you, when you're adding more columns, that and the table already has existing data, and the columns you add, order of the columns changes, you may lose the data you have in the table. So take note of that. Now, once you finish editing your table structure, you can always update this. Then to delete the table, there's a delete option for us here. As well, we could export a table and also import a table into the systems. Okay, so let's see the data for this table. You see it's empty. So we can add a row. And the first row we want to add is MD's office and whatever information that we have here. So we need to add all of these rows to our department. Let's quickly do that now. So department status for this will be 1. All the departments we are going to add at this stage will all be active departments. So department name will be MD's office. We can expand the width here. Doesn't really affect it, but let's continue. Department code D O1. And then the supervisor will be, let's quickly add that. Okay. So I'll quickly add the rest and then we can continue the session. So we have, or I have been able to add all the departments and the information for the departments. If we go to our database and we refresh, we see now that our data is in the database, same way as we can see from the front end. Okay, so MSB also has an employees table, and I will use that to show us how we can import a table into our ProcessMaker instance. So for that, we click on import, and then we select the file. You can see that the ProcessMaker PM table file has the extension PMT. And if we select that and we open, then we click on upload, and voila, we have the employees. Now, if we go back to our database and just refresh our database, and now we still filter for MSB. This is MSB, the PMT MSB employees table. And we can see that we have Anu Bello, Awa Hassan, Alex GT, Audu Bako, Ruth Ovie, Adeola Adeoye, and even the other employees here. And as you can see from this table, there is a status column that shows employees that are active and those that are inactive. Okay. Then there's the first name column, last name, staff ID, email address of the staff, employment date, designation, and the department code. Okay. So since we now have our tables, we have a department table, we have an employees table, let us now move on to working on completing the design of our initiation task for our demo process. So let's go back to the process map. And this time around, we're going to right click and take steps. Remember, we had already discussed the concepts of task steps in ProcessMaker. And remember too that we had already designed our initiation form. So we're going to drag in our initiation form, this named CARO initiation, the cash advance requisition initiation form. And then we can expand this. Now, remember that we set employees to be those that can start a case, the employees group as those that have the permissions to start a case or initiate a case on this process. And for this purpose, let me quickly go to designer and delete all the test cases we used to demonstrate the concept of task assignment. So let's delete cases on our playground. Okay, so we are fresh again. Okay, so I can return back to my admin and tables because we'll be looking at some stuff there, especially around the employees and departments. But let's look at let's start a case. Let Anu Bello start a case here. Anu Bello. Okay, and if go to new case, we can see that because our process map has to start events, this and this, it means there are two initiation tasks, and we've assigned employees as the group to these two tasks. That is why Anu Bello, that is inside as a member of the employees group, now has access to the cash advance and expense retirement process. Both start events. Employee initiates cash advance request and employee initiates expense. Okay, so this is the leg we are testing. So let's open that. You see, when a user initiates a case on the process, this is what they see. They see the form. Well, however, you notice that there are fields that need to be pre-filled by the system. Or for example, the request dates, then the employee name and the department. We need to get that. Okay. So let's go back to our designer and go to steps for the first or the initiation task. We will need to create a trigger. Remember now that when the case is rejected, it should come back to the initiation task. And we're using a variable called at case owner UID to control that. So we need to be able to set the value at runtime. And that value, so like you see on this form, the value of the UID of the case owner, the employee name, the employee department, and the request date, these values needs to be set before the form loads. Mark that. Needs to be set before the form loads. So which means if I expand this step, the Dynaform step, I need triggers. I need to place PHP logic here that would allow those values to be set. That is, the triggers will be placed inside the before Dynaform section. Note that, okay? So what essentially are triggers? Now, if you go to our main toolbox, we see one of the options there. We've dealt with variables. We've looked at Dynaforms. Now it's the turn for us to look at triggers. And as usual, if you hover on the plus button, you see you can create a new trigger. But if you click on the option, it opens the triggers modal dialog. And you can see, from what you can see, you can create a trigger. You can use a wizard to create a trigger as well and access ProcessMaker functions, depending on the one you want to use. And some other things here you can check out later. But you can also copy from a trigger that already exists in the instance. If we already had triggers we want to copy a trigger from the tutorial playground, we'll come here and this drop down will list all the triggers in that particular process. So you could copy the trigger code from a trigger that already exists in the instance that was already defined for another process. That's another way to create a trigger. Okay, but for this time around, since this is the very first trigger we are creating, and there's no other trigger we can copy from, we'll be using the create button. Now, as robust and flexible as ProcessMaker is, it cannot do everything we would require in building a business process right out of the box. You see? And so the application provides us a powerful tool for adding the necessary custom behavior using a feature called triggers. Okay. Now, triggers are basically snippets of PHP code or PHP logic that we can use to perform complex calculations and add custom functionality to processes. Whether we are fetching data from a remote web service, evaluating complex business logic, and so on and so forth. Now, triggers have access to case variables and can read and manipulate these variables. Triggers also have access to system variables created by ProcessMaker for every case. So for this, we're going to look at what are system variables and what are case or process variables and what the variable selector is about, okay? Or what we previously called the prefix for variables. Okay. Now, we should note, however, you could also use PHP variables when you use your dollar and variable name as regular PHP variables, but you should understand that PHP variables created in a trigger, they are temporary. So those values or variables are discarded once the trigger execution is completed. So for you to be able to retain a value that you make use of in your triggers, you should store that value in a process variable. Okay, so the very first trigger we are going to create, and which I create for every process I build, is the set case owner, because that is what we use to set the UID of the person initiating the request. So we click on create and type set case owner, give a description, trigger for the cash advance requisition and expense retirement process to hold case owner data. Okay. And of course, what do we want to do here? We open the editor. I'll say set case owner details. Wow, thought I was typing. Where is it? Yeah. Set case owner details. And say dollar, which is a PHP variable now, case owner UID is equal to, let me just apply this. I need the text to be bigger so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'll save this for now. And go to the process steps and drag the set case owner as a part of the step before Dynaform, part of the system PHP logic that should be executed before the Dynaform node. So let me edit it from here now. Yeah, it should be much bigger. So case owner UID is equal to, I want to get the object for the person that is logged in at the moment on a thread of this instance creating the case. So click on the variable, or the variable selector button, and you check, you see that there's a list of all the variables we have created in our process so far. But however, at the very top of the list, we have some variables that are named in uppercase characters. See, there's application, there's process, there's task, there's index, there's user log and username, there is a pin, and even app number. So all these variables having capital uppercase snake case convention in terms of how they are named, what we call system variables. System variables. So for every case that is initiated on ProcessMaker 3, ProcessMaker creates system variables in addition to the process or case variables that have been created in the design of the process. Okay. So the application system variable will hold the case UID or the application UID of this particular case, of the case that is being raised. Okay. Then process will hold the process UID of the process. Task will hold the UID of the current task. Index will hold the delegation index. It's an advanced topic. Then the user log holds details about the current logged in user, and the user underscore username holds the username of the currently logged in user, and our app number holds the case number of the current case. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back to what we were writing before. We said $case owner UID is equal to, let's use this system variable called user logged. Okay. So now let us see what this is. We can die and dump that value. Can die and dump the value. So let's go back to where we're testing the process. Right click and take reload frame. You see this value now, 158140. This is the user UID of the logged in user, Anu Bailey. So to confirm, let's go to our ProcessMaker database and search for user. We go to users. This is Anu below, and you can see 158140, and that this matches what we have here. Okay, so that's just to show you what the system variable at user logged, the value it holds. So in other words, we can say that our case owner UID process variable should be equal to this. Or this one, anyone. So let's copy this. Okay. Then what of the employee email? There's a ProcessMaker function called user info. User info. So let's go to wiki, ProcessMaker wiki, and let's duplicate this. Let's duplicate the tab, and let's search for user info. Okay, so user info is a ProcessMaker function. So let's see. Let's see if we can find it here. Let's control find user info. Okay, so that's at the very bottom. So click on that. So user info, this is how it returns the information of the user from the database. So it's a matter of passing in the user UID into user info. So let's see what this gives us now. If we say $X is equal to user info, and we pass in the UID of the current logged in user, and then we die and dump $X, what do we see? Let's go and test that. Right click and reload frame again. You see, it gives you an array object that shows you the details of the user's profile. Okay, and you can see we can get the employee's email address by accessing the mail key in the array. Okay, so let's come here. So it means if we want to set the employee email now, employee email, oh, sorry, this was supposed to be a process variable. Okay, so if we want to set employee email, do we already have a variable of that name? It does not exist, so we'll need to create that variable. But let's type it here first at employee email. Employee email will be equal to, we call this function, put it there. But with this, we're going to target the mail key, and to check whether it works, let's die and dump this process variable. right click, sorry, quit, right click, reload frame. Oh, sorry, sometimes when you work with triggers, you would have made a mistake and you see a screen like that. So let's see where are we gone wrong. Okay, so we have employee email, user info, we passed in this. Okay, so we forgot the single quote after that. Okay, so that should solve the problem. Reload frame. So you see now, it has gotten the email address of Anu Bello, which is this from our database. Okay, so let's go back to our trigger. So that is how you work with triggers, and you can debug errors and issues that arise from your PHP snippets in triggers. Okay, so this variable does not exist so far. So this brings us to this situation. When we come to ProcessMaker variables, we have what I would call registered process variables and unregistered process variables. So you could have an unregistered process variable like we have now at employee email. It is not being registered. It's not being registered under variables, but yet can be used in the process. So if a variable is registered, then it will be available in the case data for you to create or make use of the values in a report table later. However, if the variable is unregistered, then you won't be able to use that variable. The value of the variable will exist in your case data, but you won't be able to use that value in a report table because the variable is unregistered. Okay, so we want our employee email variable to be registered. So just paste this and we are good to go. Okay, now the next one, next thing we need to also determine is the date of the request, the date of the request. So I will set the date of the date the request is created. And for this, we know we already have request date as a variable registered. Then we can use the ProcessMaker function to get the current date. So there's get current date as a function. So let's see if this works. If we die and dump the request dates, let's go to where we're testing and reload frame. You see the dates. Then sometimes if what you need is the date and the time, then you can concatenate the get current date with the get current time function as well. Okay, so let's see what this will give to us. If we go to where we test and reload frame, you see this. So it depends on what you want to use. But in this particular scenario or this process, I want only the current date. So I'm going to comment out the other parts of the line there. Okay, so this is what we have so far, and I can save. And if we go back here and we reload frame, you see that the date is auto-populated, right? But we still have something to do with about the employee name and the employee name and the employee department. So for that, we would need a trigger called fetch employee details. Okay. So let's go and quickly create that trigger. Fetch employee details. And of course, where are we fetching it from? From the employees table in the database. So trigger for the cash advance requisition and expense retirement process to set the employee details. Okay, so let's save and let me go to our task. So after it sets the case owner, I'm very sure now that whenever a case is rejected by the supervisor, it will always know the employee who initiated the case for that case to be routed to the person's inbox. Okay. So for the next one, we want to fetch employee details. So we would edit this trigger now and add the relevant PHP logic to it. So we need to define an SQL query that would fetch information from these employees table. Okay, so let's quickly do that. Say we have select star from, we need the employees table from employees, and let's call this E. Okay, so where E dot the employee email, yes, where the employee email is equal to, so let's test with Anu Bello. This Anu Bello, this is his email. So we want to copy that and we'll paste here. So if we run this, we get this, but I don't need all these values. I need the first name. So let's come here and change that up. E dots, I need the first name. I need the last name. I need the department, but you can see what I have here is department code. I also need the supervisor email of that department, but it's not here. But I can tie this table via the department code column to the department table and use the department code to get the department name and the email address of the supervisor for that department. Okay, so which means I'm going to add another table here. So let's bring this down first. Say, okay, departments. And for departments, let's give it D. Hmm. So we are selecting again the first name and the last name from the employees table. And then we now need the department name and the department supervisor email. Okay, so we have that now. Let's do this. So where the email address is this, and so there are a couple of other things we need to do, and the department code on the employee table is equal to the department code on the department table. And of course, we need to add the employee status because we only want active employees. So employee status is equal to 1. So let us run this. So we get the first name, the last name, the department name, and this. So this query is important to us. We copy that and go to our trigger. And we need to write a MySQL statement. So we create the PHP variable $SQL is equal to, so we need that string here. Okay. So let's work on this. Select first name, last name, department, this from, so let's build it up. So $SQL this, and we can say from this and this, where so where the email address is equal to, we can break it off here. And then $SQL. So here we will need the employee email. So we're going to replace all of this with employee email. Okay, where it's equal to employee email. Then, of course, this will be concatenated with every other thing we'll have here. Let's remove that. Yes, is equal to 1. So this should work. This should work. So let's die and dump our SQL PHP variable and see we've not broken something. Reload frame. So we see, let's check. Select first name, last name, department, supervisor email, this, and this where, so we can see now, we can expand this, where this is equal to this, and department code is equal to department code, and status is 1. So that looks to be an accurate and valid SQL query statement. Let's go back to our trigger, and this time around, there is, let's create, say results is equal to, there is a ProcessMaker function called execute query. So let's see if it is here. Yeah, so execute query. Sorry, let me type it completely. Okay. See. Yes, the execute query function. What do you pass in? You pass in the SQL statement and the DB connection. The default is always workflow, and the workflow is the default ProcessMaker workspace. So for our particular scenario now, we only need to pass in the SQL statement. Okay. So you can say execute query and pass in $SQL. So when we do that, let's see what results this gives us. So let's try and dump that. Normally, I will just write the entire thing and then test. But just so that we can go step by step and you see what is happening is why I am doing a die and dump step by step. So let's read. You see, we get an array and we get these values, okay? So one way you need to put a check when you run queries is to put a check on the results. We say if is array, that is whatever result comes out is an array, and we're expecting, of course, one results. So count results is equal to 1. So if we have this kind of situation, then it means whatever has been returned is valid for us to use. Okay? So if that is the case, we will then have, we will then set, let's go back to see what we got. We got first name, last name, department, supervisor, email. Okay. So we can now set things like the employee name. So the employee name variable, we can select that, and this should be equal to results. And of course, we target the first element in the results, and then we target the first name, and we concatenate with the last name. So concatenate first with an empty space, and then we have this, and that's last name. Next thing to do is the employee department. So click on the variable selector button again and type department there. So employee department will be equal to what we have here. Select the department name and put there. Then lastly, the supervisor email. Supervisor email. We've not created that variable, so we need to create it later, but let's use it here first. Supervisor email will be equal to the same thing here. Take supervisor email, put it here. Okay. So this gives us what we want. Then we can copy this and then create that variable. Supervisor email, and save it. Okay, so let's go back to where we're testing the task, reload. So right now you see that we have employee name, employee department, and request date field. Is there any other thing here that we need a trigger to fill before the Dynaform loads? There is nothing. So at this point, the user can type in 15,345 and we'll get this. Okay, so let's go back to what we're designing. Now that we've been able to handle before Dynaform section, what else would we want to do? Yes, we need to set the supervisor UID. Remember that the system needs to determine the UID of the supervisor so that the case can be routed to the supervisor of the given employee. So we'll need another trigger, and we'll call that set supervisor UID. So trigger for the cash advance requirement and expense report process to set the UID of the supervisor at one time. Okay, so we have that. Now another trigger we need is one that adds comments to case notes. I'm going to talk about what case notes are, but let's just create that down. Add comments to case notes. Then trigger for the undo comments looking to handle the logging of comments. then case notes. Okay. Now, remember we had approval sign-off fields. So we need another trigger to update approval sign-off. Okay. So let's position them appropriately. So trigger timing is a very important concept that you must understand, and it depends on your what your the business requirement for your process it's all about. Okay. So let's go back to our steps. There's nothing we are doing after dialing form. So I'll leave that. But before assignment, we want to set the supervisor UID. Very important. So let's write the PHP script for that. Now remember now that we already have populated the supervisor email. So let's say supervisor email is equal to, sorry, that should be $sign. Supervisor email is equal to the supervisor email variable that's already populated. Okay, so we want to fetch the supervisor's UID. So how do we do that? We need to write a query to do that. So let's go check, come here first and work on the query. So select star from, who do we need in this case now? We need the user. So let's go to the user table. So we need to select star from users. Where u dot user email is equal to, we'll pick an email to use there. And of course, the user status, we only need supervisors that are still in the company is equal to. So what are the values for the user status? If we check the database, we see that user status is active or inactive. Okay, so we'll come back here and type active. Okay, but do we want all the data? So let's take a user, for example, from our database. I'm sorry, where is the email address? Email. So let's pick Ruth Ovier and use that to test our SQL query statement. Okay, so if we run this, we get this, but we don't need all of this. We don't need all of this. So we need to streamline exactly what we need. So let's come back here and define that properly. So we need the user UID. We need the user first name. And we need the user last name. Yeah, that should be sufficient. So with the first name and the last name, we're able to get the full name of the supervisor. And then we need the supervisor UID as well. Okay, so let's copy. If we run this to see, okay, it worked. And we can copy all of this and then use it in our trigger. So again, $SQL is equal to, we paste this. So we select this from users. and we do this, where this is equal to, so something needs to replace this here, concatenate it with, something needs to be X, then this is equal to this. We terminate the statement there. So what is X in this case now? X is this supervisor email. Copy, paste. Okay. So from users, where this. So this should work. This should work. Okay. So as usual, we'll run the query to get a result. So using the execute query function, and we pass in $SQL here. And of course, we want to check if the result is an array and if the count of it is equal to 1. So that means when that happens, then we know we have the right values we want to use. Okay. So we can then set the supervisor UID. Supervisor UID will be equal to $results. Then we'll target the first element in the array. And of course, we need this UID. Copy. Okay. Then the supervisor name. I don't think we've created the supervisor name before. So it's something we need to create, or a variable we need to register. Supervisor name. So supervisor name will be, we're going to concatenate the first name in space and then the last name. So take first name here and put here, then last name here. So this should be okay. So let's die and dump supervisor name to see if we are correct. Okay. So let's go to where we are testing the process and reload frame. Oh, sorry, remember that we positioned it before assignment. So for now, let's move it here so we can check whether we are correct. Then once we can validate that we are correct, then we can return the position back to before assignment. Okay, so let's reload frame. So you see Audu Bako. So let's check whether that is actually correct. If we go to the employees table and look for Anu Bello, which is the third record, you see that it belongs to DO5. And so if we go to departments, what is DO5? DO5 is information technology, and the email address there belongs to Audu Bako. So you see that it works. But what if there is an issue such that and you remember that our query is fetching Audu Bako from the employees, or sorry, the users table for users that are active. So this is Audu Bako. You can see that Audu Bako is active. Now, what if we go to ProcessMaker, go to users, look for Audu Bako? Let's assume Audu Bako has left the company, so his account is disabled. If we run this again, you see that it comes out empty. This can cause a problem if you do not handle such a scenario intelligently. So we need to provide an intelligent option for this kind of scenarios, so that when our process is trying to determine the next user, which is the supervisor, and is not able to set the supervisor UID, then we need the user to know or to get that information. Okay, and one way we can do that is to use a redirect. So let's search for a process maker function called PMF, which is short for process maker function, then redirect to step, correct? So this is it. As you can see here, the PMF redirect to step function is not supported in the mobile version of ProcessMaker. But so let's see what it does. We pass in the case UID, we pass in the index delegation, we pass in the step type, and we pass in the step UID. And we're told that the case UID is the application. You can get it from the application variable. If we are looking at the case UID of the current case, delegation, we get it from the system variable index. Step type could either be Dynaform and input document of this. So we need a Dynaform. And the step UID object is the UID of the object. In this case, the UID of the Dynaform. So now, what are we trying to do exactly? Remember that these get supervisor UID, it's supposed to be positioned before assignment. So which means we've already gone past the form. The user has already initiated the request and has clicked on submit. Okay, so if this happens and the supervisor is inactive because the department table has not been updated with the current supervisor, the previous one has left the company and his user profile is disabled on ProcessMaker. So what do we do exactly? So that is where we need to give an else part to our if statement. Okay, so we'll have this and we'll put redirect to previous or redirect to initiation form with error message. So we'll say G will create a new Gulliver object. This is an advanced topic, but just follow what I typed now. For now, step UID is equal to, we need to get the UID of this particular the Dynaform, the initiation Dynaform. Then let's create a message. Let's create a message and say something like this. It appears the supervisor with email address. What is this guy? This is the email address. Email address is not a valid or active user on ProcessMaker, full stop. Contact your system admin. Thank you. Okay. Just to make it a bit okay, I can choose to terminate it here and do this. Okay. So I will then do, so to be able to display the error message, I'll do this send message. Passing the message and what type of message is it? It's an error message. Okay. So this will get me the message, but this will not redirect me. For me to be redirected, I need the PMF redirect to step. So let's copy that and paste. And what do we have there? The first variable is application. then followed by index, and then the Dynaform, and then the step UID. Okay. So like I said, the first variable is the case UID, is that, followed by the index. Index would be an integer, and for integer we use at percentage. Okay, and the next thing is the Dynaform, and then the step UID, which I already have here. Now, how do I get the step UID? It's quite easy. I go to the Dynaform, click, and this is the ID. I'll copy this. That's one way. Another way would be to go to Dynaforms. This is the initiation. Click on this, we get the ID. Copy that, and we can go back to the trigger. And paste this. Okay. So remember that when we last tested this trigger, the supervisor name was empty, because Audu Bako has been set to be an inactive user. So let's see, since we've provided an intelligent way of handling inactive supervisors because such departments' information has not been updated in a database. Let's now see how our system or our process will react. So let's reload frame. So we have this. Let's now assume that the user is filling this for 35,250. And let's assume just put testing here. Okay. And no comments, and just type submit request. You see what happens. It gets to nothing to do after Dynaform, but something to do before assignments. This trigger executes, and we are returned back to the form with this error message that it appears the supervisor our statement here is wrong with email address. This is not a valid. So it's in this kind of scenario now, the user can send a screenshot to the system admin and they immediately will know, okay, Audu Bako is inactive, right? So that's basically how it will work. Okay, let's correct that statement. Okay. So if we make Audu Bako active again by enabling him, and let's try and submit. You see, it gets Audu Bako now. And when we click, we can continue. So Anu Bello has been able to submit the case. If we log out and sign in as Audu.Bako and go to his inbox, you see that case 6 that we just sent has been sent to his inbox. Okay. Let's go back to our case now, our process rather. Now we want to add comments because sometimes, since we provide a comment section, we want users to be able to add comments. So we would need to bring in the add comments to case note before routing. Okay. And then we'll need to add some PHP code here. It's quite simple. This is the kind of script. This script is always the same for every process I work on because it follows the same rules. So remember that I have a comment field called comment. That's this variable holds the web control on the form at the start of this variable allows this variable to hold whatever comments the user has typed in there. Now, just for the sake of being able to manage or massage what has been typed, I will remove prevailing and trailing spaces. So let's trim that. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is to store the present comment as a previous comment. Why are we saving it as a previous comment? Because every time the form opens, the comment field should be empty. So what we're trying to do here is move the comment that has been typed by the user and add it to whatever already exists in the comments log field, sorry, or in the comments field. So there's a comment field for us to put in the user to put the comments. There's a comments plural now text area that shows the comments that have been added by the users. Now, when we have a reject scenario, we want to be able to send an email notification to the initiator, stating in the email notification the reason why his request was rejected. But remember now, since we always need when the task routes from one task, when the case routes from one task to another, we always need the comment variable to be empty. So we need an unregistered variable to hold the comment that has been typed in by the user, so that in case of a rejection scenario, we can always use that. So we're not going to register these previous comment variable. Okay. Now let's go to the nitty-gritty of what we want to do. So if comment is not equal to nothing, then it should do the following. PMF add case notes. What does PMF add case note? What does it do? It's a ProcessMaker function. Okay. So it adds a case note to a specified case. And these are the parameters that we pass in. We pass in the case UID, pass in the process UID. The case UID we can always get from the system variable at application. The process UID we can always get from the process variable at process. The task UID we can always get from the system variable at task. Then the user UID we can get from the user that is logged, the person that wrote the comment, and then the comment itself, and whether or not it should send an email. So we're not going to, if we're sending an email, it's set to 0, to 1. If we're not sending an email, it is set to 0. Okay, so let's come down here and use that now and pass all we need to pass. So first, we are passing in the case UID. We get that from application as a string. Then we pass in the process UID. That is also a string. And then we pass in the task UID. That is also a string. So that's why it's at. Then the UID of the user that is logged, user logged. And the comment itself at comment, and we don't want to send an email, so we put 0 there. Okay. Now, if we go back to wiki, it says that this function returns a 1 if the note has been added successfully to the case. Otherwise, it will return with a 0. Okay. So what do we want to do here now? We want to pass whatever is returned by this function to a PHP variable that we'll call add notes. Okay. And we will then do this. We know that if it is successful, then the value of add notes will be a 1. If it's not successful, then the value will be 0. So we will do this. If add notes is equal to 1, it means it was successful, then we are okay to empty the comments field. The comments is equal to, so we can empty it. We can empty it. Now, after we add case notes, we need to update the comment log. And for that, we will use the get case notes. We come here, the get case notes returns a list of the case notes posted to a specified case. And again, we pass in the application UID, then we pass in the array, we pass in what format we want the case note to be presented. Should it be an array or a string? Well, in this case, since it's a comment field on our form, we'll be selecting a string. Then for the user UID, it's an optional parameter. We'll just use empty for that. Okay. And what does it return? If the type is set to array, then this function returns an array of the associative arrays with the following structure. So something like this. But if it's a string, it's going to return it in this structure. So where we see the first name, the last name, and the username of the person who added the comment, and the comment they added, and the date it was posted. Note that we're going to come back to it. So we need this function, the get case notes function. So we're going to add it here. And as usual, we need to pass in the application UID, so a string. Then we want the case notes to be returned as a string, and we don't need the user UID. And we said this needs to be passed into our comments field that holds the comments log. So add comments will be equal to this. So this should work what we want to do. So let's save. Let's save this. Okay. Now we're going to come back to this later. I just wanted to add this trigger here first. When we work on the supervisor task, we're going to see all of that come to function. Okay. Now, the next thing we like to do after routing would be to update the approval sign-offs. Okay. And now for us to update the approval sign-offs, remember those approval fields that we had? So that's what we want to do. Okay. So sometimes some people will want to create several triggers for every task. So for the first employee task, you see update employee sign-off. Then you create another trigger and say update supervisor sign-off. Create another trigger, update finance officer sign-off. But I would like to use a switch function and get all of this done. So go back here to this trigger and let's add a switch function. So depending on the task, the system will then, depending on the task, will define what the system should do. So we already know that there is a system variable that holds the task UID. Okay, so that is the first one. Now, what we want to do here is case the employee task will get the task UID for that. And what do we want to happen? We want the employee sign off. So let's type sign off, the employee sign off to be equal to the name of the person that is logged in. So how do we get the name of the person that is logged in? Let's use the user info function and pass in our user logged value. So just say data is equal to user info. Remember when we use this for our set case owner UID, okay? So it's basically the same thing we're trying to do here. User logged, and then from the information passed into the $data PHP variable, we can set the $name, the sign-off name, to be equal to, and we'll say $data, and we get the first name key, first name, and then we concatenate this with an empty space, and then get the last name as well. But remember, I would like all of these to be in uppercase. So I'm going to wrap all of this and pass them into a PHP string to upper function. Then the sign of dates will be equal to get, remember this, get current date, and I'll concatenate that with an empty space and also with our get current time function, PHP function. Oh, sorry, ProcessMaker function. Okay, so get current date and get current time. We have that now. Okay. So in other words, our sign-off employee will be equal to this guy. And the date time employee will be equal to $S date. And then we can break. And we can set the second case, which will be for the supervisor now. We just need to copy this. But in this case, instead of sign off employee, it should be sign off supervisor. This one will be date time supervisor. Okay. Then for finance officer task, we'll repeat the same thing. This one will be sign off finance. And this will be date time finance. Okay, and then we break. Okay, so how do we get the task UID of all these first three tasks, and even the last three tasks as well? So let's go to let's capture all the information here. So view always on top, and we can save this and close this. So the first task, right click and take properties. You see this is the UID of the first task. We'll copy that and paste. Then this second task, properties again. This is the UID. Copy and paste. Then the third task of the cash advance requisition leg, we have this. We'll paste that. Now, the first task of the expense report leg, take this. We have this here. Then get the task UID of the next. and then this final one. Okay, so we can go back now to that trigger and update it accordingly. So we need this first one here. We need this second one here. We need this third one here. Okay. Then for the, so this will be for the cache advance requisition leg. So expense report leg, and we can say case. I don't think we've created the variables for our expense leg, so we'll just put a break now for now, and just do this, another break, and the last one, and put another break. Okay, so we can quickly do this now. So we've not created the variables to use for our expense report leg. So we'll have it like this. So we stop with this for now. Let's check that we've not made any mistake. Okay, it looks good. Then we can save. Okay. So that's how we handle our approval signups. We'll test it very soon. And let's just see what happens. Then what's next should we do? What next should we do? Yeah, we need to set case label. Case label. Now, if we look at the case we submitted earlier, you just see that under, when you look at your case list, whether in the inbox or draft or wherever, the case, under the case column, you just see the case number. And if you have hundreds of cases like this, and you're just seeing the case numbers, you don't have any extra information that tells you exactly what is happening or what that case is about. So that is where making use of a case label is very, very important. Okay. So apart from the case label, we also want to we may also want to set some other constants like the case link. When we send email notifications, we want to put a case link in the email so that when the user clicks on it, it opens ProcessMaker in their browser. That's another thing we'll look at later. What else do we want to add? I hope for now, just those two. But how do we handle case labels? How do we handle case labels? We do that. There are two ways to do that. That's one place to do that. We can, if we set a case label on this first task, then that case label will follow the process throughout. But remember now, for this particular scenario, we have two legs. So which means from this task to this task to this task on the cash advance requisition leg, the case label will be different from the expense leg. So to just show you what I mean, let's go to properties of the first task and we go to case labels and we can type in a case label here. So let's see how that will work. And type cash advance by, we want to put the employee name. Okay, so cut this by. Now, we're going to see something happen because we're using the @@. Then we are doing this for what amount? So the amount requested commas. So remember when we were saying, when it comes to output documents or reporting, you want your amount figures to have commas. And that's why we created the amount requested with commas fields. So let's type comma here. So these amount requested commas. And it's supposed to be, okay, let's add that too. So these amount requested commas. So at cash advance by the employee name for, and what is the amount? So that's the amount. That's the amount. So let's save this. Let's try and run another case again. So let's log out of this and go back to anu.payload. And we go to new case and let's start a new cash advance request case. Now, if I type in the amount, let's say 54,720 here, and I do not submit the case, I go to do something else, it will remain in my drafts. But if you look at the label now in my drafts, what do you see? You see cash advance by Anu Bello for, there's nothing there, right? Okay. So why is it putting quotation marks for the name? It's because of how we indicated the process variable here. So we used @@, which is the string. But in this particular case, it's going to put the quotation marks within the case label. So we need to use the @= for original type. The original data type of the variable is string. So if we want the quotation marks not to be included in the case labels, instead of using @@, we use @=. And for the amount that has commas, which also is string, we use @=. So let's save that. And if we go back to our case and we open, this wasn't saved. Remember, because we did not submit, this wasn't saved. Okay. But this time around, let's try and save it or submit the form 720 and 45. Okay. And let's put test in here. And that is all we need to put here. And then we can submit. Now, if we go to participated, see the difference now. You see that the first one we submitted when we had not set the case labels, it was just like this. But the second one we then submitted after we set the case labels, it looks like this. So when you look at your case list or the user looks at their case list, this extra information that we have placed on the list by the use of the case label enables the user to differentiate one cash advance and expense retirement case from another. That's the relevance of using case labels. Okay, so if we've done one like this for our cash advance leg, we need to do another one for our expense retirement leg. So there are times that even when a process is just one leg, there are possibilities or options. Let's assume we create a vendor management process. And with that vendor management process has the functionality of allowing users to create new vendors, edit existing vendors, deactivate existing vendors. You see that there are three main functionalities with such a process. And so how do you now do it such that the case label speaks to whatever feature that was used in the process? For that, I find it useful to use a trigger to set the case label and then just take the variable holding the place label and place it in our task properties. To explain that, we're going to create a function and create a trigger. I'm going to call that trigger set case label. So let's create that trigger. Set case label. And we'll say trigger for the process to set case to set the case label. Okay, so let's save it. And we want this to happen. We want this to happen where now? We want this to happen. Let's check because trigger timing is important. We want our case label to hold the name of the employee and the amount they are requesting for. So it cannot be before dialer form. This has to be after the dialer form. Okay. So we can say let's see. Okay. We can say at case label is equal to cash advance by employee name now. So here we can use the at prefix cash advance, since we are doing a concatenation, cash advance by employee name for then the commas amounts requested commas. Okay, so that is it. That is it. And all we now need to do is to take the case label variable now. Remember, we did not register it. And then come here, properties, go to case labels, remove everything that is here, and paste this one. And remember to remove and use it as original type. So that also should work. Let's raise a case. If you raise a new case, just to check, and let's put 5,000 here. And we submit. We'll go to participated. You see cash advance by Anu Bello for 5,000. So if we go back to our process, we want to do the same thing here too. When is the expense leg? We want to set its own case label. So we put the same case label as original type, but we need to now define it. We want to use the same trigger to set the case label, whether it's the cash advance leg or is the expense retirement leg. Okay. And for that, let's go to our steps and go back to after diagonal form, access that trigger. So this is where it's also important. We could use a switch. We could use a switch, this switch PHP function by the task, right? Okay, so depending on the task, remember we had used that before. So let's undo here to get, yeah. So the first task case, which is this first guy here, we want the case label, this one here. Let me minimize this so that we can see. We can set the case label to be this, and then we break. And when the next case, which is the first leg of the expense, first task in the expense leg, let's copy that. And this time around, so this time around it will be expense reports. Sorry. By employee name. We'll fix this later when we come to the expense leg. For now, let's leave it like this. So that's what we've done. Then, so this works for now. Let's save and let's just test again to see that what we have done is working. So start another case, and this time around put 2,000 there. And let's submit. If we go to participated, you see it's working. Okay. So that's the step case label trigger that we have just done. Okay. So far, so good. I think we've done as much as we can do. There's still a bit more, just a little bit more that changes that we may need to do to the initiation task. But so far, so good. We've been able to configure assignment rules for all the tasks on our process flow. We're able to set the gateway conditions. We introduced the PM tables. We created the departments table, imported the employees table. We've been able to a large extent, let's say above 90%, completed the design of the initiation task. Why? Because we're able to add the dyno form step, then the necessary triggers to handle process logic at the task with the set case owner, fetch employee details, set case label, and even the set supervisor, and add comments to case notes and updates approval sign-offs. Then we set the case label property of the task. In our next lesson, we shall focus on email notifications. We'll look at the topic of email notifications, and then we continue work on our demo projects. We use whatever knowledge of what we have learned or whatever concept we've learned to work on our demo projects. So see you in the next lesson, and I hope you really enjoyed this one.